Today, we're tackling a big one, a token that holds a pretty legendary status from the last crypto frenzy, Crypto.com's CRO. We're going to dig into the data, the patterns, and the massive question that's still on everyone's mind. And this quote, man, this really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? It's a feeling so many investors know all too well from 2021, watching this absolutely life-changing price surge happen, but your assets are locked up and you can't do a thing about it.
And that experience, that feeling of what if, it all boils down to the one massive question we're exploring today. Could Crow ever get back to those incredible highs?
So if we're going to even try to answer that, we have to go back. We need to nail down the hard facts. What exactly happened during that historic peak in 2021? All right, let's do it. Let's hop in the time machine and rewind. To really get a grip on the sheer scale of what went down, we've got to look at the numbers from that one wild day. Okay, so the big day, the one for the history books, November 24th, 2021. That's the day CRO hit its absolute peak after a month of just insane gains. And the price it hit? Almost $1. We're talking about 96 cents. Now to put that in perspective, that was a crazy nearly 10x jump from just a few months before. But price alone doesn't tell the whole story. Not even close. It's the market cap, the total value of all the CRO out there. It's just mind-blowing. We're talking a peak somewhere between $22 and $31 billion. That is an insane amount of money to pour into one single asset. So, what in the world happened? How did this happen? Because let's be real, this wasn't just some random lucky break. There was a very specific recipe, a sequence of events, that created the perfect storm for this kind of explosive growth. And yeah, looking at this timeline, you can see it wasn't an overnight thing at all. It was actually a slow burn. The token was kind of just hanging out around 15 cents all through the late summer. Then October rolls around, you see that momentum start to build, and then, boom, November hit and the price just went completely vertical. And that crazy price action? It was powered by what you could call a perfect storm of four big things all happening at once. First, you had the Cronos mainnet launch, which got everyone super hyped about a new DeFi ecosystem. Second, the token actually did stuff on the Crypto.com platform, so it had real utility. Third, and you probably remember this, their marketing was absolutely everywhere. I mean, the stadium deal? Come on. And finally, and this is crucial, all of this was happening in the middle of a massive crypto bull run, where cash was just flooding into pretty much every altcoin. Okay, so that was then. Fast forward to now, and this is where it gets really interesting, because we might be seeing a potential echo of that past playing out right now in the charts.
I mean, look, when you pull up the recent price charts, a pattern starts to jump out at you that looks, well, a little spooky. It looks a lot like that buildup we just saw from 2021. So it begs the question, right? Is history simply starting to rhyme? And this table just lays it out so clearly. You see that pattern back in 2021, that steady climb, the little flat period of consolidation, and then that first breakout pump. Now look at what's been happening in more recent months. A period of strong gains followed by another climb. It's mirroring that initial ramp-up phase from 2021. The shapes of these patterns, they're really similar.
All right, so let's play this out. Let's say this pattern does hold. What does the road back to that 96-cent peak actually look like? What are the cold hard numbers we're talking about? Because here's the thing, and this is super important. Getting back to 96 cents isn't really about the price. It's about the market cap. That's the real number. It's the total amount of money that has to flow back into CRO to make that price a reality. And this bar chart really puts the challenge into perspective. From where it's sitting now, CRO would need something like a 4.4x increase in its market cap just to hit the low end of its 2021 peak. And to get to that high-end number, that $31 billion, we're talking over a 6x jump. Either way you slice it, that is a ton of new money that needs to come in. So, okay, let's say the chart is rhyming. That's one piece of the puzzle, but you still need the fuel for the rocket, right? You need those catalysts. And that brings us to the final and maybe most important part, our actionable checklist. What do you need to be watching for? Remember that perfect storm we talked about back in 2021? Well, recreating it isn't just about a pretty chart pattern. It's about getting all those fundamental forces to line up and fire at the exact same time all over again.
What could actually light the fuse for a CRO price surge in the fourth quarter? And we're not talking about just one thing. The theory here is that it's a combination of forces, all working together, that could build some serious momentum. So what are they? All right, first up, let's look inside the house. We're talking about what Crypto.com itself is building. They're not just sitting on their hands waiting for a bull market. They are actively rolling out a whole slate of new products to drive growth from the inside out. And what's really interesting here is just how wide-ranging this is. It's a multi-front attack, really. You've got this major push into real-world payments with a huge name like Emirati Airlines. That's all about day-to-day utility for CRO. Then you have a native stablecoin, which is a fundamental building block for any serious financial ecosystem. And maybe the biggest headline grabber, their plan to file for their own spot ETF. That's a direct play for the institutional crowd. And look, this isn't just wishful thinking or some rumors floating around on the internet. As you can see from the sources here, these are documented plans. They're showing up in major crypto news outlets and on Crypto.com's own public roadmaps. This really grounds the whole idea in stuff we can actually point to.
Okay, so that's the internal push. Now let's zoom out, because we all know that no coin is an island. What's happening in the broader market could be just as important. And right now, all eyes are on the ETF space, which could act as a massive tailwind for everything Crypto.com is trying to do.
Just look at these numbers. Analysts are feeling pretty bullish. They're predicting a 90% chance for a Litecoin ETF approval by late 2025, 75% for Dogecoin, 70% for Solana. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but what does that have to do with CRO? Well, everything. A wave of approvals for these other major altcoins would be a huge signal from regulators. It would be like a rising tide that lifts all boats, creating a much friendlier, much more bullish environment for any subsequent application, including one for CRO. And we don't even have to imagine what ETF news does to CRO's price. We have a perfect little case study right here. The price jumped 16% almost instantly the moment news broke that CRO was being included in a blue chip ETF filing. It's a super clear example of how tuned in the market is to these kinds of institutional signals. And this is that exact filing. Its importance really can't be overstated. This was the first time CRO was ever included in a US ETF proposal, putting it right there in the same basket as heavyweights like Bitcoin and Ethereum. Just being named in that list was a major stamp of validation, connecting CRO to those institutional investment channels in a way it never had been before. So here's where it gets really interesting. You've got the internal story, the product rollout, and you've got the external story, this potential ETF wave. But the real magic, the real potential isn't in looking at them separately. It's in how they could feed off each other, creating a kind of feedback loop, an amplifier effect. And what's the amplifier? What's the engine that could make this whole thing pop? It's this number, 100 million. That's roughly how many users are on the Crypto.com platform. This isn't just a number, it's a massive, built-in retail army that could pour gasoline on the fire, because they're the first ones who will see and use these new products and react to any market buzz. So let's walk through how this chain reaction could unfold. It all starts with those 100 million users. They see new features like paying with Emirates, they get curious, and they start using them. That activity drives up exchange volume and other on-chain metrics. Well, what happens next? The media sees that activity, and they start covering it. Now you've got this internal buzz meeting that positive external ETF environment, which starts to look really, really good to institutional investors. And the final piece of the puzzle, the retail users see the price start to move, they see the headlines, and boom, you get that classic wave of FOMO that can really kick a rally into overdrive. Okay, so let's get concrete. All these catalysts are great in theory, but to really understand the argument, you have to put them on a calendar. Let's look at the key dates. You can see how everything starts to stack up. The first domino fell back on July 8th with that blue chip ETF filing we talked about. Next up, in Q3, we're watching for that native stablecoin launch. Then, that leads us right into Q4, which is the window everyone expects Crypto.com to file for its very own CRO spot ETF. And all of this is happening at the exact same time that regulators are expected to be making decisions on all those other altcoin ETFs. It's a real convergence. So, to wrap it all up, the case for a Q4 surge really rests on these four pillars. First, you have the internal momentum from Crypto.com's own product blitz. Second, you have the external tailwind from a potential altcoin ETF boom. Third, you have the amplifier, that huge 100 million strong user base. And fourth, the main point is that these aren't just random events. They represent a potential confluence of factors all aligning at the same time. And all of this leaves us with one final big question to think about. Is this alignment of their internal roadmap with these huge external market cycles just a brilliantly calculated strategy, a masterclass in timing? Or is it just a happy accident, a fortunate coincidence where all the stars happen to be aligning at the perfect moment? That's something to chew on. Thanks for joining The Explainer.